Complex Fitness. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Lovely. Okay, so very, very happy to introduce MJ Mary Jo to the chat. MJ Nutrition on Instagram, who I've followed for quite a while and who I suppose you've been my focal point or my go-to for information on women's health or on the cycle or training around the cycle. Basically, I have a basic enough understanding of it, but at least I thought I did until I went onto your page or started listening to your talks or started reading your posts. And then I thought, God, this is something that I really do need to put more focus into. So if you'd like to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on as well. It's great to come on and talk about this. So yeah, as you said, my name is Mary Jo, MJ Nutrition. I set up my business there about over a year and a half ago now, kind of with the focus of looking maybe at like general nutrition for everyone. And then I realized that my passion was female health, hormones, getting women to understand, know their cycle, understand the effects of the pill, what the pill actually does, and the nutritional implications of that. And obviously, like as a nutritionist, using food as food first is kind of my approach really, and then a bit of lifestyle as well, and then supplements afterwards. So that would be my approach as well towards overall health with regard to female health and just general health as well. I suppose the reason I got into this, I have PCOS myself, so I struggled with PCOS all through my 20s. I did a degree in nutrition and it was never even touched on. Then I did a master's in nutrition, and it really kind of got my focus more into like how we can actually take control of our female cycle, our hormones, and there's so many different pathways in the body that we can influence. So yeah, that really is where what sparked my interest and got me into that area, I suppose. That's why I'm working with that now. And yeah, so I mainly work with women, and I work with coaches as well to support them with their clients, if that makes sense. And then I work with women, helping them with their cycle and stuff like that.
It's definitely, it seems to be more, I'm not going to say common now, but people, help is way more available now. Like even I have a few friends who have sought help with people like yourself, whereas I suppose that wasn't really available even a few years ago.
Yeah.
Available. The only person you could talk to was your GP or your doctor, which aren't fully specialized in that area. Even from talking to friends who are GPs, like there's not a huge emphasis on that part of the whole cycle, or there's not a huge in their course. They were quite surprised with. It's nice to have someone who has that big focus on the cycle. Now, what I am amazed with is when a female client is working with me and they don't know the difference between the follicular phase and the luteal phase, or there's really simple things that they're just not told. There's no information on it. They're just kind of told, get on with it a lot of the time. And they don't understand that their body is going through something so different to what the male is going through. So much so that they require different calorie amounts at different times of the cycle. Their energy is lower. Like, it explains so much when they do understand and when they do give it time, that it's okay to have this dip of energy, this dip in performance. You know, your testosterone is going to be lower at this point of your cycle. And I suppose the introduction, and the majority of people my age anyway are on the pill, and there are I suppose there are a lot of differences that again isn't explained, like the pill bleed and the period bleed, how they're not equal. So I'd love for you to just, I suppose, run over the basics of the cycle. So from molecular to luteal, explain the main differences and just the main considerations, basically.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So I'm going to use like a 28-day cycle as the example because it's just the most straightforward. But just I want everyone to know that just because your cycle isn't 28 doesn't mean there's something wrong. Like a cycle can range between 26 to 35 days, and that can be considered normal. Outside of that, then there may be something going on, but that's just a side note, I guess. So in a typical 28-day cycle, day one starts on the first day of your menstrual bleed or your period, basically. So that is when you get full blood flow, and it's not like a little bit of spotting before it. It's proper blood flow, and that's day 1 of your cycle. So that's the follicular phase. The reason that it's called the follicular phase is because the follicles on the ovaries are developing and growing and maturing and they're producing what's called estrogen, and estrogen is building up until you come up to ovulation. So during this follicular phase, as estrogen is rising, estrogen is what's called an anabolic hormone, otherwise known as a growth hormone. So it's really good for, supporting muscle protein synthesis and utilizing carbohydrates really efficiently. It's a great time to really kind of push yourself in any sort of exercise that you are involved in. And your appetite also may be lower at this time. Estrogen is actually an appetite suppressant. It's involved in like the leptin pathway, so it's an appetite suppressant as well. So that's why some can find it easier to adhere to a calorie deficit around this time of the cycle. So then you come up to ovulation, and that occurs around in a 28-day cycle, say approximately day 14, so halfway through the cycle. Ovulation is when the egg is released from an ovary, and this is for reproductive matters. It's if the egg meets sperm, then you get a baby. If not, then you'll get a period 14 days later. When the egg is released, or coming up to the ovulation, your estrogen is at its peak, and you also get a spike in testosterone. So around those 5 days before ovulation is when you're really at your max performance-wise. You're able to really give it your all. You'll feel good about yourself. Most women, if they're in tune with their cycle and know where they're at, will be like, oh yeah, I'm feeling great right now. And you may even feel they look better. You'll have more of a sex drive. All of that comes into it as well. And then obviously the physical benefits of feeling more energized, better performance in gym, lower appetite, things like that. So that's the follicular phase up until ovulation. Then, as I say, the egg is released from the ovary, and it's released from a follicle, and that follicle forms what's called the corpus luteum, and that corpus luteum then makes progesterone. And progesterone is what's made in the latter phase called the luteal phase of the cycle. And progesterone is, I suppose, an amazing hormone that is only made if we ovulate. So that's something to really be mindful of. So I'll talk about it in the next part about the pill, but when you ovulate, you make this hormone progesterone. Progesterone is a catabolic hormone, so it's kind of the opposite to the anabolic estrogen. It counteracts that, and it's more involved in, say, anti-anxiety effects, mood benefits, skin health, hair benefits, your thyroid. It's really important for your thyroid. So in the latter phase of your cycle, the rise in progesterone actually causes your thyroid to increase or rev up itself, basically. So your metabolism rises slightly. And this is why you might notice you feel more hungry at this phase of the cycle as well. You also don't utilize carbohydrates as efficiently in this phase of the cycle, and you use so that's why you get more cravings. So your blood sugar is a little bit more up and down, and your insulin is a little bit more up and down as well. So it's really important that you support your blood sugars by eating protein and fats at this stage of the cycle to keep your blood sugar levels stable. So that's kind of a quick overview of the cycle. You've got the follicular estrogen, luteal progesterone. At the latter phase of the luteal phase, estrogen will start to rise as well. So you'll have both estrogen and progesterone at a peak at the very end of the luteal phase, and then they'll drop off, and that's when you get your period again. And that's kind of the ebbs and flow of a typical 28-day cycle.
Yeah, and I heard you actually speak about the progesterone before, and that onto the next part, the pill can actually not block it, but I suppose you're not utilizing it because you're blocking your hormones, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
and
no,
I want to
absolutely.
know what the ramifications of that is, but I do know that some pills do have it.
Yeah, I'll talk about the pill and the hormone contraceptions, because when you're on the pill, what's happening is you're stopping that egg being released from the ovary to prevent you from getting pregnant, and that's the purpose of it. So you're basically flatlining estrogen and progesterone. You don't make them yourself. They've completely stopped being produced. So you've like, instead of your head up and down, I'm doing this with my hands for people who can't see me, but like like when you're on the pill, it's completely flatlined. So there's no hormones being made. The hormones in the pill are synthetic. So you've got a synthetic estrogen and a synthetic progestin. It's completely different to the progesterone that our own bodies would make. So the ramifications of that are, a lot of women may report feeling anxiety when they're on the pill, and it's thought that it may be to do with the fact that they're not making their own progesterone. Progesterone is like an anti-anxiety hormone. I would call it like nature's Valium. It's so soothing when you make enough of it for your own nervous system. However, on the pill, you don't make that amazing hormone. So the ramification, like progesterone is needed for all of those things, like your cardiovascular health, your bone health, and your hair health, your skin health, your thyroid. So you are losing out to all of those benefits when you're on the pill. Now, I don't want to scare people and say like, oh my God, get off the pill quickly, because it's not like that. The pill is an amazing medication. It's a medication, it's a drug. That's what needs to be, like when you're on the pill, you're on a drug. But it is a really amazing contraceptive. It's really great if you want to have peace of mind, if you're in a relationship or sexually active, you know, you like for a female, that's so important, because the stress of worrying is another thing altogether. So that's really important. My issue with the pill is when it is being used as a medication or a treatment for the likes of PCOS or PMS and things like that, because you're not getting to the root cause. You're basically flatlining the hormones, but you're not actually treating the issue at all. So when you do come off the pill, unfortunately, they're still going to be there. Those issues will still be there. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think I'd emailed you yesterday, and I put this small bit in. It's a bit of a horror story, really. So a close friend of mine was suffering with PCOS, and when she went to the doctor, that was the first protocol, I suppose. It always has been, and that's the way it has been. But then when the pill, she's been off for a while, when that was a no-go, the next route of call was antidepressants.
Yeah.
Which was quite shocking. I thought it was quite shocking. But
it is, and like it's very typical as well. It's really common as well. And like, you know, women go in with like, I just don't feel it myself. I'm all over the place, and they're given the anti-anxiety or depressant medication as well on top of the pill, or you know, as another treatment. It's just, I think we deserve better. There's so much more that you can do. And this isn't a blame GPs, because it's not them, it's the system. And they only have 10 minutes. They don't have that time to give to us. And they haven't been educated on that, basically, simply put, like, and that's not what their system educates them. They're educated to give something quickly to sort it out. It does sort it out temporarily, but it doesn't get to the root cause.
Yeah, I suppose they don't have the luxury that maybe a coach would have with trial and error or building trust or basically trying out different things.
That's
it's
so
kind
true.
of, as you said, a quicker fix. So something I really wanted to get onto as well was, let's say, take two women, a woman who's on the pill and a woman who isn't. And I've often heard this when I'm explaining, you know, your different phases. Let's say there might be a video I'd send around at the start where it's just explaining that, you know, it's normal to have these cravings here. We may adjust your training for this 10 to 14 days at this part of the cycle. So, you know, I'm not saying expect to lift less, but I'm saying don't be surprised if that happens. And a lot of the time, responses I would get is, oh, but I'm on the pill, so that doesn't matter, or I'm going straight through. But would that still matter? Would that still affect?
So the evidence
or would it just be?
Yeah, the evidence really with the pill is that it doesn't really seem to impact training too much, and you don't get the ebbs and flows like you would say in a normal cycle. So like say a typical female going through a 28-day cycle, around day 10 to 14, between that time, they may be superior that time versus someone on the pill. And that's a maybe. Like that doesn't say that it will happen. Like everyone is going to be different, but they will have that extra strength because it has extra estrogen, extra testosterone. Someone on the pill will not have that. They'll literally be the exact same 28 days of the cycle. So they won't have that ebbs and flows. So I guess like they'll be able to kind of, you know, they'll obviously have their normal levels of fatigue and things like that, like anyone else. It's not to say that they won't, but like they may not also have that same push behind them in that follicular phase as well. So they'll kind of be nearly the same throughout the cycle, if that makes sense. Throughout their cycle, I quote unquote, because they don't, like, I didn't actually touch on that. When you're on the pill, I suppose I did, but it's not a real bleed that you're getting. I think you said it yourself. It's a withdrawal bleed from the synthetic hormones in the drug. It's not an actual period, because in order to get a period, you need to ovulate. When you're on the pill, you suppress ovulation, so there's no ovulation occurring.
Yeah. So they're, I suppose, the same level throughout. Another thing I hear is, and you had covered it there, is it's, oh, but I take a break every 28 days and I let myself bleed. But you've covered that there. It's not the same.
Yeah,
It's different. So your hormones are still going to be that same kind of flat line, I suppose.
absolutely. Yeah.
The next thing is, and I liked your style on this one, that the period pain is not normal, which I've heard you speak about before. But it's
Yeah.
funny, if I'm sitting in a room full of my friends who are females, or if I'm talking to them or clients, there might be 1 in 5 these days who don't, maybe 2 in 5 who don't experience that pain. So it's almost like it's becoming normal because so many more people are. And I don't know if that's to do with, well, obviously it is to do with, I suppose, the changes in lifestyle, nutrition habits, things like that, exercise. And what I did notice all the way up is that women who were very active, who played sport, they never really seemed to suffer when I had them. And maybe it's down to the lifestyle, as you were saying. But I suppose what's the point I'm trying to get to now? What is the main difference there, let's say, between someone who is getting the pains severely now, or even a 5 out of 10, and someone who is not? Is it just primarily down to lifestyle, or can it be down to stress, or can it be down to nutrition, sleep?
A few different factors. I guess firstly, to say you're right, like period pain is common, but that doesn't mean it's normal.
Yeah.
So that's just something to be aware of. Period pain occurs due to elevated inflammation. So you get a rise in prostaglandins, which are like these inflammatory molecules. And when you have more of those, they cause the uterine lining to shed, but they also can cause pain and other symptoms. So when you've got period pain, you've got to look at like most likely when you've got really bad period pain, you may have heavy periods as well. It does depend, but it's kind of like an imbalance in your hormones. You probably have more estrogen and low progesterone, and you probably have more inflammation going on. So like you said there, like the girls who are doing, say, more training and exercise is really anti-inflammatory. So if you're doing moderate amounts of exercise during the week and not overkilling it and not going overboard, but doing a moderate amount of exercise, you're having a good level of anti-inflammatory effects from that. So that's a really good lifestyle practice to help you with lowering your pain to your period. Again, lowering inflammation through, if you smoke or if you drink a lot, they'd be 2 factors to really consider. What is your sleep like? If you're not really prioritizing your sleep, that's really important for lowering inflammation as well. So these are lifestyle measures that people actually would never think about having anything to do with your period, but having massive impact on your cycle. And then obviously, what foods are you eating? If your diet is primarily made up of inflammatory foods, so I'm talking about lots of like oily, fatty, fried, baked foods, sweet sugars, that kind of thing. A lot of omega-6 oils like corn oil, sunflower oil, those kind of things, which you'd find in a lot of processed foods. And I don't want to demonize processed foods, but if your diet is made up a lot of those, it is going to have a more pro-inflammatory effect. We want to have a balance between like the pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory foods. You want to have that kind of balance in the diet. And then you want to be adding more anti-inflammatory foods into your diet. So if you consider even a typical Mediterranean style diet, it's like omega-3 fats from oily fish, nuts and seeds, olive oils, coconut oil, avocados, fruits and vegetables, of course. There are antioxidants, polyphenols that really support reducing period pain, and then whole grains and lean proteins and things like that. And these, like, once like you period pain, as I say, is not normal. So there's something going on in your diet. Like if it's like a 5 out of 10, if you've got like an 8, 9 out of 10, possibly visit your doctor and suss out maybe endometriosis or something like that, and get that investigated. But I have seen clients of mine who have really severe period pain, and through management of their diet and lifestyle have made significant differences in 1 month. In 1 month, I have a client who literally plays GAA as well, and was on the floor like in agony before every match she'd have. And this was just a repetitive cycle for her, and she'd be on like the highest amount of medication, everything. And then within 1 month, her period pain reduced significantly from changes in her diet and lifestyle. I suppose to note there, like high estrogen levels as well can give rise to painful, heavy periods too. So estrogen needs to be removed from the body through the liver and through the gut. So the liver is like the phase 1 pathway to detoxify estrogen. So the liver, to help with that, you need to eat plenty of green leafy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, beets, sweet potatoes, like all those types of foods. So foods that are like, they're basically really nourishing for the liver and have moved that estrogen from there. And then your gut is the second part. So you really need to support your gut health as well. Anti-inflammatory foods, good source of fiber, prebiotic and probiotic type of foods, and that can really help move that estrogen out of the body. Signs of estrogen excess would be swollen, painful boobs, irritability, depression, and a lot of mood swings. Fluid retention is very common associated with estrogen excess. So they're kind of signs that you may have that as well. So yeah, there is so much though that you can do with painful periods. Another really good tip as well is red raspberry leaf tea. So if someone suffers really badly with period pains, I always recommend this. It basically contains a polyphenol called fraserine, which soothes the uterus, the lining of the uterus and the muscles in the uterus, and stops them from spasming as much. So it really helps reduce the painful cramps. So that's a really effective tea to take if you do get painful cramps before your period. I recommend taking that like, the week of your period. So not just on the day of your period, like a good few days beforehand, to really help soothe that lining and not have it like being very painful.
Yeah, I suppose the main point from that I really like is the nutrient density. And I have a bit of a theory that the reason for, I suppose, a lot of these pains and PCOS and the increase and how it's becoming more common is, I suppose a few years ago, a lot of people moved toward the whole if it fits your calories, if it fits your macros approach, and kind of just worried about the weight side of things and left the nutrient density to the side almost. Well, apart from protein, everyone seems to just nail that and let everything else fall into place no matter what, as long as the scales was treating them right, I suppose.
Yeah,
but I do see a lot of people now coming back towards nutrient density, and even within their tracking of their food, they're still conscious about getting their certain amounts of fruit, veg, just the really simple things that people let go of for such a long time. Do you think that played a part?
I think that's down now to good coaching as well. Like they're not just focusing on your calories and like your protein, they're focusing on other factors like your sleep, your lifestyle, and then like your fruits, vegetables. Are you getting fats? Like fats are so important for females. If you're on a low fat diet or some coach tells you to cut out fats, that's not like maybe very short term, but not long term, because women need fats to support their hormones. That's how our hormones are manufactured. That's where we store our hormones. And so if we're not eating fats, we're not getting that. But no, I do agree. Like our lifestyles have massively changed in the last, even if you want to go beyond like 50 years ago, and like that's why these things are on the rise so much more so like than they were. Obviously genetics comes into these kind of conditions, particularly PCOS, but like our lifestyles have massively changed. We are more sedentary, and we're on our screens so much more. Our lives are a lot more convenient in lots of ways. Obviously there's more stress, and there is more stress within our lives. That in itself is a completely new lifestyle change compared to even say 50 years ago. Yes, there was stresses, but we've got this kind of on-the-go rat race style lifestyle, and the impact stress has on our hormones cannot be it's so underrated. Like you could talk all day about how stress influences our hormones, and it's really important that you're managing your stress levels, because once there's stress, you'll have PMS, you'll have issues with your periods, and you'll have heavier or longer or more painful periods. You'll definitely feel more anxiety coming up to your period, more cravings, more just not yourself, low mood once there's more stress. So it's really, I'm a massive advocate of supporting your nervous system and your stress levels to manage your hormones and your periods and your cycle.
And when people, I suppose another important thing is when people say stress is that they immediately think of just maybe a little bit of financial stress, relationship stress, but stress can come from overtraining, come from undersleeping, come from not getting the nutrients in your body. There's 101 ways to stress yourself out. And by fixing these small things piece by piece, you will slowly lower that stress. Obviously, there's 100%. Some stresses that are going to be there, like maybe some financial stresses, but other things you can control and minimize rather than adding on.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
Like as you said, like we can't really help the relationship stresses or the financial stresses, but what you can help is how you're sleeping and how much exercise that you're doing, and like what you're eating to look after yourself, and what you're feeding your brain. Are you constantly on your phone looking at stimulants and stuff like that, or maybe taking a detox from that, or just not even a detox, just a break and giving yourself more time to like either be with family or friends, or reading a book, or out in nature or something else. Like being out in nature is it's one of my favorite things to do for stress, but like it is, so there's definitely, I think there has to be science behind it. It's very grounding, whether it's the beach or the forest or just a walk outside. It is so therapeutic, I think. So like I really recommend people make more time for things like that in their lives, rather than constantly glued to a phone.
Yeah, or get a dog.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. I do that if I could.
So the next thing I want to touch on is the client pathway. Sorry, am I skipping a little bit
Sorry,
there?
it's cut off there, is it?
Oh, yeah, it'll come back in a second. That's the Roscommon Wi-Fi.
Yeah. We're back now.
Okay, good. So the next thing I want to talk about is maybe I know the majority of people who will watch this will be females, of course, but let's say if they're experiencing these things, which I know a lot of them will be, what's your sort of client journey or client pathway for those?
Okay, so if they're like, if they got PCOS, will I talk about that?
PCOS, perfect.
Yeah, okay. So when I get a client with PCOS, or they think they have PCOS, I really firstly go into how they were diagnosed with the PCOS, because I find that some people come to me saying they have PCOS, and I find that they actually don't, that they've got hypothalamic amenorrhea. And sometimes people come to me and they don't think they have PCOS, and they actually do. So it's really important that I'm getting the right diagnosis. I don't diagnose, but I look at how they got their diagnosis. Did they get their bloods taken? That's really important. I normally get them to take their bloods, because I'm able then to tell from the bloods the markers that it would look like PCOS. Then I'd also look at their physical symptoms. So like for people who maybe don't know what PCOS is, it's called polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's basically a metabolic endocrine disorder or condition that has various different symptoms. The main symptoms are irregular periods, excess androgens, and these excess androgens lead to excess hair growth in kind of male areas. So, on the jawline, lower back, stomach, nipple area, around that kind of area. Excess androgens also lead to acne. Again, it would be quite severe acne around your jawline, your chest area, your back, things like that. And then you may have weight gain as well, particularly around the midline. You might have more cravings, a lot of fatigue, anxiety, things like that too. Now, just to note, you do not have to be overweight to have PCOS. That's just a kind of a little bit of a myth as well. So that's what I firstly kind of get the right diagnosis, make sure they have the PCOS. When I find out, like, if they do, I'm kind of looking at like, okay, what type of PCOS do I think they have? There's a few different types. So do I think it's insulin resistance? Do I think it's inflammation? Do I think it's adrenal? Or do I think it's post-pill? So without going into them in too much detail, insulin resistance, 80% of women with PCOS have that. It's basically, there's an issue with their cells responding to insulin, and they're not basically allowing the sugar. Insulin basically transports sugar into your cells. The cells have a lock that isn't working properly, and it's not letting the insulin in. So the lock is like blocking the insulin from coming in. So you're imagining then lots of free flowing insulin and glucose going around your blood. And this is what's causing all of the issues with weight gain, with elevated androgens and all of that. So the typical signs of that will be the weight gain really around the midline. That's a really good sign of that. But again, you can get your bloods done to see what your blood sugars look like, and your HbA1c. That's another good indicator. And then you've got post-pill PCOS, which is kind of, as the name suggests, you've come off the pill. Your periods were fine before the pill. That's really important to note. But then when you come off the pill, you haven't got a period for 6 to 12 months. So that is the pill has really kind of done a number on you, in that it has affected the communication between the brain and the ovaries, and you haven't got your period back. Then there is inflammatory PCOS, and you would typically see that with other symptoms like, say, eczema, psoriasis, IBS, joint pain, fatigue, headaches, so other kind of inflammatory conditions. And then you have adrenal. So adrenal is kind of the last one, where you might have a lot of stress burnout, and it's associated with an elevated hormone called DHEAS, which is another type of testosterone secreted from your adrenal glands. Now, I don't really put people into one box only. There's usually a crossover. Like if you've got insulin resistance, you've also got inflammation. Do you know what I mean? Like they're all kind of coming together. And I suppose in a general way, I start looking at their diet and what their current diet and lifestyle is like, and really educating them on how to balance their blood sugars through, typical like low GL carbohydrates, more protein. Like protein is really important for PCOS. And, they do need to have good fats in the diet too, fruits, vegetables, like getting the basics right. And I know that might seem like, oh, that's so obvious, but it's really important that they're eating like blood sugar stabilizing diet. Again, like it will be like each client is going to be specific. Like some client might do well on having low carbs in the morning. Again, that will depend on their type of PCOS. So if they had adrenal PCOS, I would not suggest that at all. However, if they have insulin resistance, really struggling to lose weight, low carb can work for them because it prolongs the insulin fast overnight. So they're not needing as much insulin then until about lunchtime, which is really important. Then I'd obviously look at their lifestyle. Are they sleeping? What is their stress levels like? And what did they do to actually look after themselves? Things like that. And then obviously then there's more supplements that can come in. Then I recommend specific supplements and targeted supplements depending on their issue as well. So I suppose that's kind of how I work with them. And then I coach them every single week because again, there's no point in me like giving them a plan, go on their way and implement it and hope they do really well. They do need that kind of accountability to kind of keep them on track with these new habits and behaviors to help them get their cycle. And I always, manage their expectations as well. It takes time to regulate these things. It takes time to get your insulin levels down, to lower that inflammation, lower those androgens. But it's really, about putting that time in over the next 3 to 4 months and seeing what happens. But yeah, that's pretty much what I would do.
Yeah, and another note is what takes one person 3 months could take someone else 8 or 9 months. So that's definitely an important note. So the last point I suppose I'll touch on you with is and I know I've heard you say this a few times as well, and I like how you say, you're not against the pill. It's as a contraceptive, it's perfect. And you said it here again today, but you said it's important to know what to expect when you're coming off the pill and when you're weaning off. And I suppose people aren't really told that. I suppose people will come off the pill. Yeah. I know of people who have come off the pill with the expectation of having a child fairly soon without ever knowing the knowledge that might not happen for a year, maybe more. It depends really.
Yeah.
So I suppose a quick run over just some expectations to have coming off the pill if people do decide to come off it.
I think it's really important that like we understand that we've taken, say someone's on the pill even for 5-6 years, we can't expect our own hormones to just magically kick into place again and work for us. We just completely shut them down for a lot amount of time. And it doesn't really matter how long you've been on it. It could be a year or 2 years. You have shut your hormones down. It's not going to happen overnight that they kick into action again. What I would say is, if you haven't got a period, say after the 6 months, and then maybe like looking at like just speaking with someone to kind of get a bit more support around that. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong at all, but not at all really. There's a lot that you can just do to help to get it back. Like it takes around 3 to 6 months for it to kind of maybe come back for most people. However, if there is issues, it could be 6 to 12 months or more as well. So just to be aware of that. I suppose with the pill, what it can do is deplete certain nutrients. So it can deplete your B vitamins, your magnesium, your zinc, it depletes your omega-3s, so your EPA and DHA. It affects your gut health. So you're kind of having basically an imbalance in friendly to unfriendly bacteria as well. So all of these things are obviously going to affect you getting your period back, your regular cycle back when you come off it. So what I would say is when you are on the pill and say, you're coming off it, for that transition period, really like obviously up the nutrient density of your diet, but maybe add in a little bit more supplements and to kind of support that transition. So getting some omega-3s in, maybe taking a probiotic for 3 months, and getting a good quality multivitamin that has zinc citrate in it, magnesium citrate or glycinate in it, and these are just good forms of those minerals that are absorbed well by the body, and your B vitamins as well. And that can help with the transition more quickly and like not make it as difficult. But yeah, when it comes to like say trying to conceive and you come off the pill, I definitely say give yourself at least 3 to 6 months before coming off it, at least, to kind of get your body ready and to get your cycle back again. Because it's just like when you do come off the pill, they say you're most fertile that very first month, but after that, then it's about getting your cycle back and like regulating yourself again, because you've got like when you come off the pill, you've got this crash in hormones and a big surge, so you've got a little bit of it's a good time then maybe if you're on it, but I suppose and that's something to be also careful of if you're not trying to conceive. When you just come off it, you're quite fertile, but after that is that window they say where you're trying to get your cycle back, and that can take some time. It really does depend on the individual, but I really would encourage not to panic, not to stress, take your time. It will come back. It's just about finding out the reason why it hasn't come back and getting to that root issue and then sorting it out that way. But yeah, it does come back. Like I like again, with myself with PCOS, I was put on the pill, and then when I come off, it would take ages for it to come back, and then it does come back though, and that's me with a condition. So if you say hadn't a condition beforehand, it will eventually come back. If you have had a condition before you went on the pill, unfortunately, that's still going to be there. So like I said before, that doesn't go away. So you will have to look after that when you come off the pill.
Perfect. Well, that's been an absolute wealth of knowledge over the last 35 minutes.
Fab, yeah.
I think I've asked as many questions as I can without probing too far, but yeah, I think this is going to be huge value to people, and to any female clients who sign up with me, they will be getting a link directly to this from now on. Just here,
great,
take this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's brilliant. Do you want to give people a run over of where they can find you, or where you're putting up podcasts and?
Yeah, so I have the podcast, the Female Health Podcast. So I just finished like season 1, and I'm getting ready to record season 2. And so you can get that on Spotify and iTunes, the Female Health Podcast. And then on Instagram, MJ Nutrition. If they put in MJ Nutrition, it should come up. The name is mj.nutrition_. So yeah, that's where you'll find me. But that's probably the best place if you want to like reach out or talk, ask me anything, to get me on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, that's lovely. Again, thanks a million for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And thank you so much for having me as well. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Complex fitness. Ba-da-da-da-da-da.